You know, for over 400 years, one play has pretty much defined the very idea of tragedy. It's a ghost story, it's a detective story, and it's a bloody tale of revenge that has absolutely captivated the world. So, what is it about a 400-year-old story about a Danish prince that feels so immediate, so modern? Today, we're going to dive into the masterpiece that is William Shakespeare's Hamlet. All right, so picture this. We're on the freezing, windswept battlements of Elsinore Castle in Denmark. And let me tell you, the guards are absolutely terrified. Because for 2 nights in a row, they've seen an apparition. A ghost that looks exactly like their recently deceased King Hamlet, wearing the exact same armor he wore in his most famous battles. And this is where one of the guards, Marcellus, drops that super famous line, and man, it just perfectly nails the feeling. There's this deep, festering sickness in the kingdom, a kind of political and moral rot that's hanging over everything like a thick fog. And the ghost? Well, he's just the first sign that something is seriously wrong. And you gotta understand, this rot, it isn't just political. No, this is deeply personal. Things really kick into gear when the young Prince Hamlet, who's still deep in mourning for his father, decides he's gonna confront this ghost himself. And the story that ghost tells him, well, it's gonna set him down a dark and all-consuming path. Okay, so here's the deal. Hamlet's dad, the old King Hamlet, a total legend, by the way, is dead. But it feels like before anyone's even had a chance to properly grieve, Hamlet's uncle, Claudius, has not only grabbed the throne, but has also married Hamlet's own mother, Queen Gertrude. The whole thing happened so fast, it's more than a little suspicious, right? So when Hamlet finally comes face to face with this ghost, it tells him a story that completely flips the script. See, the official story was, oh, he got bit by a snake in the garden. But the ghost lays out the chilling, horrible truth. He was murdered in his sleep. Poison was poured into his ear by the very man who now wears his crown and sleeps with his wife, his own brother, Claudius. So you can imagine this changes everything. All that grief Hamlet was feeling, it just morphs into this burning, fiery need for justice. He suddenly has this terrible secret mission, and it's about to become his one and only obsession. This is the ghost's direct order to him. This line right here is basically the engine that drives the entire play forward. Hamlet is now bound by duty, by love, to avenge his father. But think about it. How on earth is a prince supposed to prove that a sitting king is a murderer? Hamlet's answer is to stage a performance, a really dangerous one. He decides he's going to put on what he calls an antic disposition. Basically, he's going to pretend to be completely, utterly insane. The logic here is that if the court just writes him off as a lunatic, he can basically float around them like a ghost himself, watching the king, searching for proof without anyone ever guessing his real mission. And you know what? His act is really convincing. Pretty much everyone, even the woman he loves, Ophelia, they all buy it. They think he's lost his mind. But the king's top advisor, this guy Polonius, he notices something's a little off. He feels like behind all the crazy talk and bizarre behavior, there's some kind of logic, a method to the madness. But carrying this weight, this mission, it really starts to take a toll on him. And this brings us to probably the most famous moment in all of literature, where Hamlet's fake madness starts to feel an awful lot like real despair. He's so completely overwhelmed by it all that he asks himself the ultimate question. Is it better to exist and suffer, or not exist at all? Now, this isn't just a simple question about suicide. It's way deeper. It's this profound philosophical wrestling match he's having with himself. He's weighing the pain of living against the absolute terror of what might come after death. And in the end, it's that fear of the unknown, that undiscovered country, as he calls it, that just paralyzes him. And that right there, that's the heart of his famous inaction. Okay, so after all that heavy soul-searching, Hamlet finally decides to stop thinking and start doing. He comes up with this plan that is both brilliant and, honestly, super risky to get the proof he so desperately needs. And what's his weapon of choice? A theater troupe. Yeah, when a bunch of traveling actors just happen to show up at the castle, a light bulb goes off for Hamlet.
He realizes, hey, I can't just point a finger at the king, but maybe art, maybe a play can lure the truth out into the open.
He calls the whole scheme the mousetrap, and the genius of it is just how simple it is. He gets the actors to put on a play for the entire court. But here's the twist. Hamlet has written a new scene himself, a scene that reenacts the murder just like the ghost told him. The stage is basically his little experiment, and Claudius's reaction? That's the only data he needs. And oh boy, does it work. The second the actor on stage mimics the murder, pouring poison into the ear of the player king, Claudius just loses it. He leaps to his feet, starts screaming for light, and storms out of the hall. Bam. In that one moment, his guilt is on full display for Hamlet to see. The mousetrap just snaps shut.
But this huge win for Hamlet is also what sends the whole story spiraling into tragedy. So right after the play, Hamlet goes to confront his mother, Gertrude. He hears a noise behind a tapestry, and thinking it's Claudius spying on them, he just whips out his sword and stabs right through it. But it's not the king. It's that nosy advisor, Polonius. And that mistake, that is the absolute point of no return.
Killing Polonius, even by accident, is like knocking over the first domino. It sets off this horrific chain reaction of death and disaster that's going to take down the entire Danish court. And the fallout is just immediate and catastrophic. First, the murder sends Polonius's daughter, Ophelia, into this heartbreaking spiral of madness, and she ends up drowning. That, in turn, brings her brother Laertes storming back from France, breathing fire and wanting revenge for his father and his sister. And of course, Claudius, who is a master manipulator, sees his chance. He points all of Laertes' rage right at Hamlet. Okay, the final scene, it's just a masterclass in complete and total devastation. The plan is a rigged fencing match, but it goes wrong in almost every way imaginable. Queen Gertrude accidentally drinks a cup of poisoned wine that was meant for Hamlet. Laertes manages to wound Hamlet with a poisoned sword, but then in the scuffle, they swap swords. Now Hamlet has the poisoned blade, and he wounds Laertes back. As he's dying, Laertes confesses the whole plot, and with his last ounces of strength, Hamlet finally gets his revenge, forcing the poison down the king's throat before he collapses and dies himself. And then, silence. The stage is just littered with bodies. The entire royal family is gone. So after all that carnage, you have to ask, why? Why are we still obsessed with this story? What is it about this 400-year-old play that just haunts us? I mean, just think about that iconic image, right? Hamlet, holding the skull of Yorick, who was the court jester when he was a kid. And this scene, it's not really just about death. It's about what it means to be alive. He's staring right into the face of his own mortality and asking, what's left of us when we're gone? You know, our legacy, our memories. Does any of it even matter? And I think that's the secret. That's why this play has lasted for so long. It doesn't hand us easy answers. Instead, it hits us with these huge, inescapable questions. Is revenge ever really right? What's the difference between how things seem and how they really are? Where's the line between sanity and madness? See? These are our questions, not just some Danish princes from 400 years ago. So in the end, after all the ghosts and plots and death, we're just left with him, Hamlet. So who is he? A noble hero? A cold-blooded killer? A brilliant mind just trapped by his own thoughts? There's no easy answer. There's no one label that fits. And that mystery, that incredible, haunting complexity, that's why, even after 4 centuries, we're all still trying to figure out who Hamlet really is.
Join us as we go beyond the book, exploring the wisdom within. Subscribe for deeper dives.